I hope each of you is doing well. We love you. We are very excited. It's Tuesday, and here we are. We have another amazing and fantastic episode. And as you can see, Jen and I, we are dressed up in pink. So we are going to talk a lot about pink and about October, the special month of breast cancer awareness. But without further ado, how are you doing, Jen? Are you excited to be with us?
How are you? It's Tuesday, so it's another Petpix World Celebrity Catwalk collab. So thank you. Folks, if you come on in, please hit, if you never hit the share button before, please hit the share button. It's right there on the bottom left-hand corner of your phone or your tablet or your laptop. We've got some really great information that our special guest is going to be sharing with us tonight. So thank you, Vasi, for making it possible.
Yes, I'm very excited myself. And even if friends, we are currently like live streaming from tablet and etc. Very soon you're going to be watching the full version of it. But can you tell us a little more about our very special guest today? Because I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Come on in, folks. Come on in. I'm very excited. Kimberly Michelle, I see your message. Thank you very much. So folks, tonight we have a really special guest. It could not be more fortuitous that we are closing out October. You see that we've got our pink on, and we have got an incredible guest who is going to be she's an open book in terms of sharing her story. You will also be having the pleasure of meeting her next month, as she will be a judge and a special guest at Paws in the City in November in Spartanburg. But please, everyone, welcome Mrs. American 2022. So current title holder, get into it. Christy Clark is with us. Thank you, Christy, for coming on, for even agreeing to do Paws in the City. And thank you very much for sharing your story. For those that are not familiar with Christy, and I promise I won't talk the entire time, but Christy is really incredible because in the height of the pandemic, so 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, when we were all, at home trying to figure out what was happening, Christy was diagnosed with invasive lobular carcinoma. And for those that did not go to medical school, such as myself, that is the term for, AKA also known as breast cancer. And instead of, doing what I would have done, which probably would have been eating 6 pints of Haagen-Dazs ice cream and laying in a fetal position on the floor for the next, 18 to 24 months, she completely did a 180. And I'm thrilled to say 2.5, 3 years later, she is a survivor. She kicked breast cancer in the tush, forgive my French, and she's really turned this into an incredible testimony. So thank you, Christy, for being here. Please, I don't know where to begin, but I guess at the beginning, and I just want to know what in your brain made you immediately snap into incredible action mode. I don't know. Maybe you can start there. Like, how did you not fall apart?
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction. That may have been the best one I've ever gotten, so I love it. I could have just sat here and listened to that all day. So yeah, well, I'll start at the beginning. So the Haagen-Dazs thing rings very close to home because there were lots of days like that, lots of times. But so I was diagnosed in February of 2020 with invasive lobular carcinoma. I did not even know what that was. I knew they told me, yes, I had breast cancer, but I thought breast cancer was breast cancer. I didn't realize there were all these different types. And at the very beginning, so my husband deployed actually in January to go to the Middle East. So this is now 3 weeks later. I'm having a mammogram, which they tell me there's something there and they don't think it's probably anything to worry about. And, I had a biopsy, of course, on a Friday, which meant that I would get no news until Monday. So a very long weekend and an 8-hour time difference between where my husband was and where I am here in South Carolina. So we would talk, and it actually became kind of a funny little talk where I was like, well, you know what? I was in my, at the time, 41. So I was like, I'll just have a, mommy makeover, no worries. And that was truly my thought process because I wasn't expecting to hear the words that I had breast cancer. It was sort of a way to get me through the weekend. So Monday comes and the very sweet nurse navigator called me and said, "Are you somewhere you can talk?" I'm like, okay, I've been waiting on this phone call. And I'm really expecting her to say that I don't have breast cancer. And she said, "You do have breast cancer." It was at that time that everything immediately went into action. I mean, you are truly, if you can picture like a factory being kind of a widget and it just going, that's what it's like. And that's no slight on the healthcare system. They just got it down to a science that when you're diagnosed, you then come for this time, you figure out whether or not you need an MRI and things like that. And it just sort of goes so quickly because, as we know, cancer is no joke. So you have to act quickly. So at that time, they told me that my cancer was invasive lobular. And if you can picture February of 2020, we are just starting out in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So my time to go into the surgical oncologist that they put me with was the last time I would really be able to have anybody at the places with me at any of my appointments. So my husband would call in, my family would come with me, and I went into just sort of fight mode where it was kind of like, okay, what's next? And that's really where my journey started and where my platform started, because I started realizing very quickly that women did not have the answers. I left that day with a huge binder. I was told my cancer was probably about 2 centimeters at the time, and probably no lymph node involvement, and probably only needed a lumpectomy. It was very much like, we're probably at a stage 1. So that's really where all this started. And I left that day with the massive binder. And the binder went from "you're diagnosed" to "how to plan for you not to be here." And it was in between a massive amount of, and all I could think of was, this got really real and really fast. And I knew of people that had breast cancer, but it wasn't anything that I ever heard a lot of people discuss. I mean, we all see the Susan G. Komen ribbons. We all know October's breast cancer awareness. Pink was my favorite color. So, I was like, okay, but it got very real on what my next steps were. And as I talked to a few people that I knew that had it, they had some answers, but it wasn't an enormous amount like I was looking for. I was looking for the everyday answers. I was looking for, if I do chemo, what's it like? Should I get a lumpectomy, or should I opt for the double mastectomy or a single mastectomy? Like, where do I go? And in that, my husband, we had to call the Red Cross and get him home. He was able to come home for 2 weeks during, I opted for a double mastectomy, and I'll talk about that. But so he was able to come home, and he got home. So height of COVID, he was on the last plane out of the Middle East that the military was flying anybody home, because all the bases were shutting down. Everything was shutting down. He got to Baltimore, he rented a car, and he drove all the way here, and he got here the night before I would go to have my double mastectomy. So in between that time frame, I wasn't feeling like where I was put where I was diagnosed was the right place for me. It seemed like it was just where they told me to go. It seemed I wanted a double mastectomy. By this time I was having an MRI, which showed that the cancer was actually larger than they thought. So I knew then I absolutely wanted a double mastectomy. I just wanted to be the most aggressive I could. At the time, I had a 5-year-old little boy at home and a almost 9-year-old little girl at home. So I really was on this, I have to be here. And you asked me a great question. You said, like, when did I kind of come into that, where kind of what I'm doing now? And at the moment that I found out I had breast cancer, I told my husband on the phone that day, I said, no matter what, I want to handle this with grace. And at that time, I had no idea if I would be here. I had no idea really where I was on the staging of cancer, but I knew it was important to me that I showed my daughter and my son to handle something with grace and to handle a storm that way. And, you know, God is the only one that gave me that power to do that, because honestly, there were many times I wanted to ball up in the corner, like you said, with Haagen-Dazs, and it was only in those moments. And so I was very focused on that. And that is what brought me to look elsewhere out of South Carolina. And actually, my husband, when he's, as I tease him, playing Army in the Army Reserves, he's a medical device rep, and he had a good friend that worked for the breast implant side of devices with Mentor. And he said, where would you send your wife? Who is the best plastic surgeon? And he said, Dr. Harper with Graper Harper Cosmetic Surgery up in Charlotte. And he said, the reason I would go that route is because when you find the best plastic surgeon for reconstruction, you find the best surgical oncologist, because those guys work with the best plastic surgeons. So I sort of backed into it. I went from a reconstructive side to find my surgical oncologist, Dr. Peter Turk at Novant. And it was absolutely a blessing. I mean, I left here, which was scary. It was right down the road for me. It's where I had both of my children. It's where everybody just said, just get the cancer gone, just go here. But I opted to have a little more for my life and took a hold of my health and advocated for myself. And that's what got me up to Charlotte. And I knew at the moment I met both of those surgeons, that was it. That was the right call. And I had my double mastectomy. That was in March. So I was diagnosed in February. I had a double mastectomy in March. And at that time, the cancer was not as small as they thought. It was actually 7.7 centimeters. It was quite a large mass. And it had 2 lymph node involvement. So I had 2 cancerous lymph nodes. They took 3, and 2 of those were cancer. So I knew leaving surgery that day. So I had a COVID, couldn't have anybody in the hospital with me. My husband was able to come in long enough after my surgery to see me in the hall to go up to my room. And that was it. So I had this double mastectomy. He's standing in the hall saying, surgery's over. You did have lymph node involvement, which I knew right then that meant that I would have to have chemo. That was the big thing. If there were lymph nodes, that meant chemo. If there weren't lymph nodes involvement, I could probably get away with just radiation. So I went up to my room, sat there and kind of watched TV. You know, I was sort of in this haze of waking up from anesthesia. And it was very strange. And they had me out of there the next morning because they didn't want anybody there with all this COVID going on. So my husband waited downstairs. They wheeled me out, and an 1.5-hour drive back to Chapin in South Carolina so that I could recover from a double mastectomy. So that led me to then my husband had to leave, and I had 4 rounds of chemo and 25 rounds of radiation. And that's where I was talking earlier to y'all about, I have 2 puppies, but at the time I had 1, and that is Huck, Huckleberry Finn, and we call him Huck. He is a giant brown golden doodle, and he's just absolutely adorable. And at that time, he would have been about 1.5 years. And I would lay in my hospital bed. My children, so we're a blended family. So my children were with their dad, and my husband's deployed at the time still. So I would be laying at home in my bed, in my hospital bed, trying to recover. And Huck would come and lay on the bed next to me for hours on end, and especially during chemo. And I would fall asleep probably 6 to 8 hours just totally after chemo, just, done. And he would not wake me up to go to the bathroom. He would lay there, and all of a sudden I'd kind of jolt awake, and I'd go, oh my gosh. And I'd run and take him outside, and then he'd run outside, and then he'd come back in and lay right beside me. So I called him my chemo buddy, because about my third round of chemo, right after that was done, I got very sick. I thought it was chemo is, it sort of builds on each other. So it's not strange for your first time with chemo to be okay, second time be worse, third time like that. Third time rolls around, and I'm very, very, very sick. And I'm in the bathroom, and I FaceTimed with my husband. And he said, I think you need to call the doctor. 2 o'clock in the morning, he sends me on this wild goose chase to a 24-hour pharmacy about 30 minutes away to get prednisone. And I throw Huck in the car with me and start driving, and I'm so sick, and I thought, I can't do this. So I call my mom, who lives a little bit away from me. I go pick her up at 2 o'clock in the morning with Huck in the car. And we drove to the ER to find out that I was actually in anaphylactic shock from my chemo. So I could not finish my 4th round of chemo because I actually went into anaphylactic shock twice. So 2 rounds of epinephrine on 2 different nights, and that was it. They said, if we give you any more chemo, then the chemo will kill you. So it went from, whirlwind in a month time of being diagnosed, having a double mastectomy, and then going through these treatments that the 25 rounds of radiation seemed like a breeze compared to, although radiation is very difficult, very hard on the body. And after that, when my husband came home, he came home about a month before I was to have my reconstruction, which would have been almost to the day a year later. And I walked out to him. He's working in the yard, and I said, I've never really done any pageants, but for some reason, I wanted to do Mrs. South Carolina. And he was like, I think you should. You have a great platform. And the reason he thought I had a great platform is I started to journal, and my journal was really a blog that I started called The Blonde Bombshell. And everybody kind of laughs at the name because they're like, what is that about? And that is a name that Josh, my husband, has always called me. And so I named it that as sort of a way to feel better and be like, oh, it's a cutesy little name. And I started to journal so that I could remember the things that I went through, so I could help women with the answers that I didn't have myself and that I desperately, desperately wanted. Things from, what do you use so you don't get mouth sores? Or what does chemo actually feel like? Or how do I get through radiation? Are there things I can take? I had so many questions. And so I started the blog. And I started noticing that as I was starting it, I would get all these, for my posts, I would get all these people commenting or chatting with me, because there's a chat feature you can see on the screen right now on the bottom. You can see it says, let's chat. And that actually comes directly to me. So I started having women from all over the world. Sweden, France, Germany, and all over the United States, where women were having the same questions. And I realized that one of the things that they liked is that I was very transparent. I didn't write anything sugar-coated. Like, for instance, the ones that you're scrolling through now, the second chance-iversary, that's because a lot of people will call it their cancer-versary. And I hated anything that I was not going to give cancer the big shining light. So I call it my second chance-iversary, because my whole thing is about second chances. And so that's really where all that started. And I wrote things kind of funny, because that's the way, it was just kind of silly. And some of the things I thought of, and I was like, this is really how I felt. And so I started writing it from that perspective and just being extremely transparent. And I think that's why so many women reached out, because 1 in 8 women are going to be diagnosed or are diagnosed with cancer or breast cancer. And now they're saying it's 1 in 7. There's my Huck. You were just on him. You can see that picture of me with him. And that was him. And that was actually me and him in my hospital bed. He's actually laying on my regular bed, and he's leaned over on my hospital bed. And that was right after chemo. And he would lay like that so many hours, and you just the best. I mean, he's just the best. So they really truly know when you're going through something. And so I started the blog and really started, like, there's one, it says, put your big girl panties on and advocate for yourself. So those kind of things, like, that's me after my double mastectomy when I left. But yeah, so that one is kind of the put your big girl panties on. That one is written more about my journey on advocating for myself and leaving plastic surgeons that told me I would always look reconstructed and that I should just be happy to be done with the cancer. And I thought, that is what led me to Dr. Harbour, because he said, absolutely not. And I have lots of pictures on there. You can see me even with my my swimsuit on at Mrs. American. And that was a big deal for me, because that was the first time that I had really been in public, except we live on the lake, but it had really been the first time I'd been in public in a swimsuit since Reconstruction. And I was so confident, Reconstruction, finding the right plastic surgeon. And I was so confident because he did such a great job, and he made me feel like I told him that's what's her name from, oh gosh, Jessica Rabbit. I used to tease my plastic surgeon all the time that he needed to make me look like Jessica Rabbit if I was going to go through all this. But it was really important to me and that's at Miss America. And that was such an important time, because when I did this platform, it was to show women that we do not have to settle for just having the cancer gone. That is not where we're at in healthcare, and it's not where anybody else is at. For some reason, people just think that, well, women are going to be fine and just, you should be happy that you're a mom and you don't have cancer. And I wanted more. I wanted to show that we can still feel beautiful and thrive after breast cancer. So I did the Mrs. South Carolina pageant, and I won Mrs. South Carolina American. And I went to Mrs. America and Las Vegas, and was crowned Mrs. American. And so absolutely has been a whirlwind for me. And now I am on my way in December to Mrs. World, which is my kind of culmination, the Miss Universe of this of the America organization. So I am so excited to share my breast cancer platform and my thriving, because really my breast cancer platform is more than the Susan G. Komen ribbon. I love that, and I think it's wonderful. But for me, we have so many people that advocate. But normally I have it on my sash. I don't have it on today, but I normally wear a pink crown, because my big symbol is the pink crown of survivorship. Because I feel like whether or not you have one of these because you did a pageant, if you're a survivor, you've got a crown. You have the best crown of all. There is not many people that can go through this and come out the way these amazing women do. And so my crown is a 5-point crown, and it stands for the word faith. The F is for fearless. It's for you to be fearless in your fight and in your battle. The A is to be authentic, because it is absolutely imperative that you are authentic with your journey, authentic with yourself and with your doctors, and you tell them exactly what you want and how to get there, because you know better than anybody. I is for inspire, because the moment you are diagnosed with breast cancer, you hold that journey in your hand, and you might inspire one person or 10,000, but you are meant for that journey. And T is for thrive, which is my big part of my platform, because it was all about thriving after breast cancer and what you do with it. And H is one of my favorites, because it is for honor. It is honoring yourself, honoring the 1 in 8 that will come after you and that are going through their battle now, and then especially to honor those women that are not here with us, that lost their battle, and that we are here to share their stories and to hold on to those and show that that we are strong warriors for breast cancer. So that is my story in a nutshell.
Incredible, Christy. Absolutely incredible. The first takeaway that what struck me when you first started talking, of course, was the importance of the mammogram, because it was that mammogram that really clued you in that something was even wrong. Because I take it you didn't feel sick. You didn't say, ouch, I have a.
Well, actually, and I kind of left that part out. So I was in the shower, and the year before I'd had a mammogram, and they saw something in the other breast, and then they figured out it was nothing. So then I was in the shower a year later, and I went like this to get the soap off of me, and I was like, oh, that kind of hurt. Breast cancer doesn't hurt. At least that's what they tell you. So I was like, well, that's weird. And my husband said, well, when do you go to the doctor next? And I had my yearly physical coming up the next month. So I went to my doctor, who's an absolutely amazing advocate, and he is so diligent with women's health. I mean, make sure you are with somebody that is like that. That is what saved my life to begin with. And Dr. Stallard said, I'm just not happy with it. I'm going to send you for a diagnostic because I have dense breast tissue anyway. So it's kind of hard to feel. I always have kind of lumps and stuff. And so I had dense breast tissue. So I went in, and the mammographer that day happened to be somebody I knew. Another love note from God. I talk about that on my blog too, how many love notes from God I've been given through this journey. But I've known her, and she did my mammogram. She took me down to the diagnostic where they do the ultrasound. And I thought it was a little odd because they were doing it here, and then they kind of went under my arm. And I was like, well, that's strange, but I'm not a mammographer, so, we'll see. And so the doctor came in, and he said, we do see something, and we'd like to biopsy it. And so I went the next day and had a biopsy. And so the mammogram, absolutely, but it was my gynecologist that was so diligent to say he couldn't really feel it that day. And he could have sent me home and said, I don't really feel anything. And for my cancer to be that large, invasive lobular is I had one of the better cancers, if you could call it that, but it was a more slow growing. So for it to already be 7.7 centimeters, I had it for a while, and it probably didn't show up on the mammogram that past year. So as somebody who is not a self-checker or who hadn't been, I am always telling people, please check. And if you feel anything, that's where your advocacy needs to start, because do not listen to a doctor that says, if you felt it, insist on the mammogram, insist on the diagnostic, insist on the biopsy. Those things are imperative for our health. Because if they had not done all that, I would not be here. I mean, I wouldn't. I was already, when I was diagnosed and I had when I had my bilateral mastectomy, I was already, they said, probably at a stage 3. And, stage 4 is metastatic. That means that, I'd not be here for the long term. So, I advocate for anything that you feel.
And I actually want to kind of say some stuff here. So I'm right now 39. I'm about to turn 40. I'm transparent about my age. So I had mine when I was 35. And I remember last year I went to my gynecologist for regular checkup, and I said, please send me. It doesn't matter if my insurance accepts it. If it doesn't, it has been few years since I haven't been checked. So he gave me note. I never went. But this year I went to him. The first thing was, please give me the note. I was careless last year, too much with podcasts and Petpix. He sent me, and I went. The first opening, I said, I don't care. I'm moving appointments if needed. So to all the women, in fact, by the way, even men, I heard that men can experience it as well.
Absolutely.
So please, it doesn't matter if your insurance accepts it or not. Don't wait these 5 years, because we entitle on average, and again, I'm not in the medical field, I'm a photographer. We entitle average 5 years for your insurance to cover. Please go and check it. Check it out. Don't wait to feel anything, because you can see you can still go and not be discovered. And for those of you who don't know how much it's 7.7 centimeters, this is a little over 3 inches. So this is a big chunk. So please, everyone, just think of you, check your insurance, see different payment plans if needed, but don't leave it you know, it can happen to anyone. You know,
it can, and your treatment completely changes. So for those that find it very early, it's normally a lumpectomy or something like that, and there's then usually no treatment, maybe radiation, but don't go through chemo unless you have something like that. Then a chemo 100%. I mean, anything to stay here, but you have check fairly often, and if you feel anything, just keep talking about it with your doctor. If you feel, I have a very, very sweet friend who went through breast cancer about the year after I did, and she had what's called triple negative, which is the worst kind of breast cancer. It's very, very aggressive and very hard to treat. And she was under 40. She was 39, so she had not, and she kept telling them she felt something, and they kept telling her for the last 3 years that it was a calcium deposit. Oh, it's probably a calcium deposit. They never did anything, never did a mammogram, and she it was very sick, went out to MD Anderson, and they had to remove most of her chest wall to get, because the cancer had gone into her chest wall. And I hear stories like this all of the time. I'm so blessed and honored to have all these wonderful women reach out to me where I get to hear their stories and talk to them. But this is not it's not uncommon. It's actually becoming quite common, which is why my platform has been so important to me, because it's not only just about checking, but then people sort of are like, well, what do I do now that I have it? We hear all this mammogram, we hear all this stuff about getting all this, but there's nothing I could have done to prevent it. And they don't know of what we could have done to prevent it. Mine was estrogen positive, which meant also, and HER2 negative, which meant that mine was what's called environmental. It meant that it was something in the environment. It could have been something I was breathing in. It could have been something I ate. It could have been anything, but it was considered more environmental. And if you have a breast cancer like that, I didn't have the BRCA gene, so I didn't have family members. I don't have the hereditary gene to give me breast cancer. So then it was very scary. Then it became, what is it in our environment that did this, that made those cells turn over to be a cancerous cell? And that's extremely concerning. But if you haven't ever been tested, but you think that you might have the BRCA gene because of family members, especially a mom or a grandma or an aunt, I highly recommend getting the genetic testing as well, because there are so many people now called previvors. So instead of being a survivor, they're previvors, and they're those that go ahead and have, like Angelina Jolie, have the double mastectomies because the gene, your statistics of having breast cancer are so high. So I would definitely look at things like that. Talk to your physician to see if you can get genetic testing if you do have family members like that.
Christy, you have really opened up we have all these incredible comments coming in. Leslie Riddle, who is one of our original longtime supporters, and she is a doggy mom too. She says she found hers in the shower on Halloween night 15 years ago. So happy I am still around to help other women with nutrition and counseling. Shauna Lee, please get the 3D tomorrow mammogram. Can you believe my male gynecologist passed away from breast cancer? So we had touched on that.
Yeah.
That men can get it as well. Never trust your doctor, your friend, or a nurse. Always trust your gut, your own body. You know your own body better than anyone else. So yes, really resonating with a lot of women. Thank you all very much for sharing, and any questions or comments, or tag someone who you think may benefit from this. This is really incredible. And on Christy's website, theblondebombshell.net, are some really great, for lack of a better word, chemo and radiation hacks, if you will, that she came across in terms of chemo and trying to keep some of your hair, if possible, different hats and caps and treatments, and for the mouth sores, and just things to do to kind of help. Did I read something about cookies, Christy? Am I crazy?
Oh no, I had ginger snaps.
Anything food related, I will say. Oh no, the food drove you crazy. No, it's too much of it. But certain things that you can tolerate. Yeah. You see, that's what I remember. Yeah. Cancer, and I'm talking about the cookies. I love
ginger snaps, and I got them on Amazon. They were these amazing ginger snaps. And I was so obsessed with these because it was the only thing that I could eat and make me feel good. And then the next round of chemo, this is the other thing, the next round of chemo, I couldn't stand them. So I had this enormous tin of these ginger snaps that I couldn't eat. But that was the other thing about chemo, was that things changed so quickly. I liked certain things and then I didn't. And then I couldn't stand metal. Like I couldn't drink out of my Yeti cup, anything metal near my mouth. Silverware, I couldn't eat with silverware. I'd use plastic silverware. It's something to do with the metal and the type of chemo. But that's the other thing, if you're going through something like that, I have lots of things on there that I tried and some friends tried, all the way from tea tree oil on my nails because it just does nasty stuff to your nails, to the Digny cap that I wore to try to save my hair, and I did get to save a good bit of it, but I did lose some on top. It's grown back now, but things like that, and really showing not just about going through all of that and how you can get through it, but also how you can feel better during it and how you can thrive during it and how you can absolutely, ladies, look forward to thriving after. This is not the end. It's just the beginning, and you are in a storm. And one of my favorite quotes talks about that God would never, or God sometimes puts a Goliath in your path so that you can find the David within you. And that's how I felt every day, that I was David with this slingshot and a rock, and this Goliath was in front of me, and I was going to take it down. And of course, we know that that's not always the case for people, but I encourage y'all to look at it. If you are going through breast cancer, or if you have, I take now letrozole, which is like tamoxifen, and I have to take it for 10 years, and it really hurts your joints. And I would get out of bed and feel like a old lady getting out of bed. I could hardly walk. And I started to work out with a trainer, and I realized all of a sudden I had no more pain, and it was the working out. So I quickly blogged about that because so many people were saying that it was debilitating for them. And I was like, please, please, please try weight bearing exercises. It made all the difference. And so it is so important. And just know that this isn't the end. This is the beginning of your story if you're going through this. And if it's been 15 years even, you've got an amazing story. How awesome. That is so meaningful to me, to know that there is people with I'm at 2.5, and I'm just so thankful that we have these women who are thriving at 15 years. So it's so incredible.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
You'll get to meet. Christy will be at Paws in the City next month. We will try to rope her back for 2023. So definitely, please, she will be there. And she is, as you see, she is very transparent. She is very open with her story and with her experience, and with just her journey as what has happened. Really, really incredible. Absolutely incredible. Are you already starting to prepare for Mrs. World, or do you have a little time, or there's never any time?
I have no time. I leave on December 8th. So, and it's about a 12-day thing out there, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to represent the United States. What an honor, with a military husband, and just so excited to be Mrs. American and represent our country and represent the beautiful women, survivors. You know, I'm so happy to bring those stories to a national platform, and such a big one. And just follow me at Instagram, Mrs. American. It's a Mrs. American Official is the Instagram page. And then the Blonde Bombshell .net. Make sure the blonde has an E on it. A lot of people don't put that on there, but that's where you'll find my journey, my blog. But follow me on any of those. I'd love to hear from y'all. And I think she put the QR code out there even to get straight to it. So thank y'all for having me. What a wonderful
this is incredible. Like I said, Christy will be at Paws in the City next month. After she wins the Mrs. World title, we will have her back to tell us, to give us the inside scoop on how that was, and she can fill us in on all the details. Is that in Las Vegas, Christy, where you're going?
It is. They're having it in Las Vegas, which I'm actually very glad because it's so close to the holidays. I was like, oh my goodness, where are they sending me? But
right,
I'm
right.
excited.
So good. So she'll be in Vegas. She'll be able to tell us about her escapades in wild Las Vegas. Absolutely awesome. Awesome. Really incredible. Like I said, we will be seeing Christy. She's going to carve out a little time for us in the midst of all her preparation for Paws in the City. She will be judging our Kings and Queens contest along with Jennifer Tolbert. So very exciting, very exciting.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you very much for finding the time for sharing with us your story. And I just want to say to people, if you're not happy with your doctor, just make sure you go for a second opinion. I think it's important. And thank you very much for just being inspiration, being such a incredible person. And I'm excited to meet you in person in a few weeks. I just almost here. I can't believe almost very soon we'll be in person together.
Yes, I'm excited to see y'all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Jen. And
absolutely, thank you so much, Christy. Incredible, absolutely wonderful. See you all very soon. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye everyone. Bye bye.